Should I be investing in sports? Should I be investing in entertainment? Should I be investing in streaming television or streaming audio? Those decisions come from consumer insights. And consumer insights are not going to be available to you if you're just taking the outcome from an AI engine. We're all focused at the beginning or end state, depending on how you want to think about it, with what marketers care about. And I think to put ourselves in the marketer's shoes, it's a complex time to be a marketer. Things are not different, but they're complex. How do I navigate a consistent view of a consumer across linear television, connected television, streaming audio, terrestrial radio, etc.? How do I link all that stuff? And I don't have any sense that my marketing campaign is not just a bunch of chaos, but actually has some connected throughput through all those initiatives. The best way to be really good at marketing in the future is to...
This week on Next in Media, I chatted with Matt Spiegel of TransUnion about the state of data and identity in the digital ad world. What really has changed since cookies and privacy laws and all the signal loss we've been talking about, and what hasn't thanks to AI. Matt and I also talked about his point of view and the role of agencies going forward, and whether agentic advertising is a real thing yet. Let's get started. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Next in Media. I'm Mike Shields. My guest this week is Matt Spiegel. He is the EVP of Marketing Solutions Growth Strategies at TransUnion. Hey, Matt. Thanks for being here.
Yeah. Hey, Mike. Good morning. Happy to be here.
Psyched to talk to you at this moment in time because we're at a pretty interesting juncture, I think, and you're at the center of like all these interesting identity issues, conversations, trends. How do you sum things up? Because we're in this moment. I've been asking a lot of people that we're supposed to be in cookie apocalypse. Signal loss is still real, even though things have changed. But then you also have this wave of AI-driven media buying where identity's role may or may not be changing. I don't know if you can sum where things are, but where do you see things right now?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. We could probably spend 45 minutes on that question alone. I guess I'd start here. Listen, I think the thing to remember and what is kind of what are we dealing with at large, right? And we're all focused at the beginning or end state, depending on how you want to think about it, with what marketers care about. And I think to put ourselves in the marketer's shoes, it's a complex time to be a marketer. Things are not different, but they're complex. What do I mean? So much of what we're after in the current world is how to become more data driven, how to enable more precision marketing, but do that at scale.
Yep.
And to do that is actually on one hand not that hard, but it's hard when you don't have the right infrastructure. And at the core, most marketers and most of the ecosystem players out there lack the core infrastructure, which is a connected ecosystem of data, quote, infrastructure. And I don't mean technology necessarily, but there's a technology component. But I mean the ability to connect different data sets in order to have an actual sustainable, scaled, and lasting view of customers.
So they have lots of data. They just can't make it all talk to each other and paint a clear picture for them.
That is
speaking very broadly.
That is absolutely one part of the problem. It seems, I think, for a lot of us that are practitioners in this industry, we spend so much time on the bleeding and leading edge of the stuff that we do, that we do forget that a lot of these large-scaled organizations that we think of as marketers, they're not marketing organizations or organizations that do marketing. And so there are many different things that are required in that organization, and they deal with the fact that the CRM database might be in one place. The transactional records of customers might be another. Their marketing prospect database might be a third thing. And they're not necessarily linked. And
so as much as we're like, there's a cloud and everybody just plugs into it, like that's not that simple for a lot of
it's not where everybody is. I think that's really, really important. Right. In fact, we just won a piece of business with a QSR that is actually earlier in that journey than later. Even though they collect a good bit of loyalty data, that loyalty data, because they created an app and they therefore track
racing for more of this, right? We got to get more data.
That's right. And that exists and it's great. But if you have that as its own thing, disconnected from your other tools, disconnected from the rest of your marketing, you find there's still a lot of work to do. Not to mention, by the way, there is a practical reality that for still many customers, the core data hygiene is still something that takes work. Right. So that, again, is on this screen. I don't know if our listeners can see, my name's listed as Matthew. I don't go by Matthew almost anywhere.
Look at me, Michael. I hate, unless I'm in trouble, I don't like hearing that.
There we go. So we're the same. Our parents, trained us well, right?
Right.
So, but if I'm Matt in one database, Matthew in another, have they been linked? Right. Again, simple data hygiene stuff, totally solvable. But practically speaking, a lot of organizations are still going through that reality. And so the headline for me is that there is still at the core a set of disconnected data assets that create so many of the problems that we deal with on top of that. And identity resolution and the signal loss was one of those realities because it's not a set and forget type thing. And so you are right. Marketers are dealing with, on top of the disconnected data to begin with, you then have signal loss. You then have disparate privacy regulations and rules depending on where you're operating around the world. I still believe the end goal is still pretty much the same, which is to aggregate more data on the customers you work with, understand consumers holistically better, and apply that to great marketing strategies and do that at scale. But yes, you have to do that differently. And by the way, don't forget, better adopt AI. Oh, wait, measurement models are changing. Wait, what data can I trust? So yeah, it's a complex time. It's solvable, but there's a lot to do.
I want to come back to the AI point, of course, but you made me think of this. The inherent, my impression, and maybe it's because of who I talk to and what I see, it always feels like the platforms are going to be a step ahead of the brand side, of the agency side, when it comes to identity resolution, just because there are inherent advantages. There are huge logged in platforms, which I think is that am I right in thinking that way? And does that create a weird imbalance where we're in this outcomes based era, and those guys are always going to be talking about their advantage there?
Yeah. Let me unpack that a couple of ways. I think there's something there. Listen, when, talking about the walled gardens is what I really hear you talking about there, which is separate maybe than the scaled technology platforms. And I think there's a dimension that's relevant too.
True.
But there's certainly the big walled garden media platforms. Listen, there's no doubt about the fact that they have a scaled view of customers with a level of dimensionality that few marketers can have on their own. And most marketers, given the reality of the world, like the easy button, if you will, of being able to make calls to those big platforms and just get outcomes. There's a reason why those businesses are scaled as much as they're scaled. The thing that we certainly see in the conversations we end up having is, and this, by the way, it feels like what's old is new again, right? This was the conversation in 8, 9, and 10 when we were just creating programmatic ecosystem, and the whole talk track was, how do I move from opaque ad networks into programmatic buying with transparency, right? Like a decade and a half later, we're kind of in the same cycle of that conversation, or we're in another cycle of the same conversation, I think is better said. And so today we have that same dimension, which is, as a marketer, how do I choose, or what do I choose? Do I choose the easy button? Knowing that these companies do have all this identity data, they do have, by the way, a stitch to that, the types of behavioral information which leads to good marketing campaigns, but they won't share it, but I do drive outcomes. The problem with that's a singular view of outcomes, and I'm spending money in lots of places, and now how do I do all that counting that attribution? So you do ending up in a place that says, yes, number one, the media companies and the platforms are probably ahead of most marketers in that intelligence.
Right.
Marketers are clearly catching up. Agencies, obviously have made a lot of investment in that space. We power some of them. We can talk about that as well. We have many direct marketing clients that, you leverage identity resolution also, but it's the beginning. And so on top of that, you then need to get committed to an analytical practice that wants to understand consumer insights, a media buying strategy that actually gets into deep granular segmentation, and then importantly, a measurement strategy that actually values the ability to understand attribution across all these platforms. So you can do all those things, but back to what your question was there is an advantage for platforms. There's an easy button for marketers in turning to the platforms, and that's the trade-off, right? Which is, can I press the button? I know I'm getting good outcomes. I don't necessarily know why. I know I have some double counting, if you will.
Long term, maybe it's not great, but now it's looking good.
This is the constant balance of our industry. Now, again, I believe personally that we will trend, and we have over the last 15 years, we've trended towards more transparency, more long-term knowledge, more data sharing, more of that sophistication. That, to me, that's an ongoing trend that will not stop. But each step of the journey, I think there are some pauses in that. And then there are times that we as practitioners and, hardcore believers of the potential take it too far. Right. And then you find it's really kind of, we go back and forth a little bit in my mind.
You mentioned, I was going to ask about this. You mentioned the agencies all the holding companies, Ad Age actually had a really good piece in this recently. They're all trying to tout themselves as AI-based platforms with an identity, with a unique identifier at their core. I'm summarizing this a little bit, but it feels like they tried this about 10 years ago and they had some fits and starts, and now they're really serious. I guess, what do you think about that trend? Can the holding companies compete or play in that game? And then how do you work with some and others? What is that? That's a lot to unpack there as well.
Yeah, no, all good. Let's take it first from, what the agency's strategy, right, which makes a ton of sense, right? Which is ultimately what's going on is their marketers expect the investments that they make in media to be driven by data and granular segmentation.
Yep.
Right. That to be good at unique custom media strategies is not just about scale. Scale's still important, and the idea that it doesn't make any sense.
Right.
But it is to, how do I navigate a consistent view of a consumer across linear television, connected television, streaming audio, terrestrial radio, digital, display media online, mobile apps, etc. How do I link all that stuff? And I don't have any sense that my marketing campaign is not just a bunch of chaos, but actually has some connected throughput through all those initiatives. If you're a scaled media agency, you have to have that view of identity resolution. How you get there is a different discussion.
Yeah.
Some have clearly acquired companies. Some have built this from the ground up. And some turn to companies like TransUnion to be that core infrastructure. Listen, I think there's always going to be a push and pull of, does it make sense for companies to invest in this themselves? Certainly someone like me, having seen this game, thinks it's really hard to stay current and stay as good as
I wonder about that. Yeah. How can you, the knock on holding companies, fair or not, they're not technology companies at their core. How can they compete with a platform? Or can they really, should you build an identity product on your client's work? Like how hard is that to do?
Well, I think so. I would go only slightly different direction on what the challenge is, right? I think these holding companies can do it. I think the reality is it's less a technology problem. It's more data sourcing and analytical problem, which again, can it be solved? Sure. Should you solve it? I understand why some are trying to do it directly. I get it, but not everyone's going to. But I think the core question really is much more about the ability to stay current, to provide a best-in-class solution, and connected to that, how do marketers view their role of their media buying agencies in this data-driven marketing ecosystem? And that is different for many.
Yeah.
Some marketers have been with their same agency for decades. Many other marketers change their media buying agency every few years, all the time. If you're in that latter camp, then sticking your data infrastructure to your agency partner, I think, brings you challenges. You do not want to have to start that over all the time. So to me, again, I listen, I don't, not only, again, I sat in the shoes. I was at Omnicom way back when, as you know. I get these investments. I would be making the investments inside agencies. I think independent players like TransUnion offer a lot of value in that ecosystem. And I think as a marketer, what I'd be really judging is, what are my long-term bets here? Because certainly, and again, as you said, at some point in time, we'll unpack AI. Maybe it's now. But the more that we turn to AI-driven tools, that historical knowledge becomes really, really critical. And the last thing you want to do is reinvent that every few years.
Digital advertising is facing growing signal loss across browsers, devices, and connected TV. That makes accurate identity more important than ever. Intent IQ is a privacy-first identity resolution leader helping advertisers, publishers, and platforms recognize and reach real audiences across both cookie-based and ID-less environments. Powered by a patented identity graph and advanced signal enrichment, Intent IQ delivers the scale and accuracy needed to drive measurable performance and better monetization for both advertisers and publishers. To learn how Intent IQ helps turn fragmented signals into real results, visit intentiq.com. Okay, I promise we're going to talk about AI. Hold on.
Yeah, all good. I'm actually not that big in a rush either, by the way. Right. But I know. How can we not get there?
I'm just trying to tease the audience here.
There you go.
I happen to have met with Horizon last week, really showing me their platform and their blue identifier, and you guys are partners with them.
That's right.
How do you help an agency build their identity product, spine, whatever direction it goes? And maybe this is not your question for you, but how do you make sure that you're How do they not all become the same when they work with a partner like you versus somebody else?
Yeah, it's a good question. And actually, I don't think that's the challenge, because if you actually think about what we're all trying to do with an identity resolution spine, as you said, foundation, footprint,
Right.
which again for us starts with having both scale and depth of identity data signals. Um, Everyone wants that to be as accurate as possible, right? Like that is foundational.
Yeah.
You actually don't want to differentiate on whether you have right or wrong
True.
identity
Yeah,
resolution.
you don't want to be all over the place, and then when it's supposed to be something that is totally accurate.
That's right. So, but I'd take totally slightly off of it. Let's be real. We are in marketing data. It will never have total accuracy, but you want really high quality accuracy,
Right.
and you want scale. And quite frankly, actually, depending on use case, you want to be able to swing the dial a little bit. If you're doing a targeting activation, you might be a little less concerned about accuracy. You might take some of those extra consumers and put them in that segment. I'll go ahead and message to them.
Right.
But in a measurement use case, you want to be really, really accurate. And by the way, really important, and I think this is one of the challenges, and where I think our work to help agencies like Horizon is important, is I think one of the biggest issues our industry faces is when you use one identity infrastructure to target and you use another identity infrastructure to measure. Now you've got this data, confusion that's really, really hard for marketers, is to be like, well, do I trust my measurement data or do I trust my targeting data?
And stupid question, why does that happen? Because it's just a totally different vendor. It's not your own.
Because everyone's got a slightly different, calculation of how you stitch together identity signals. You've got slightly different match, formulas. And so if you start with a TransUnion segment for activation that you decided I want to be highly tuned to accurate, you then pump that through the ecosystem, and let's say that it got translated to a UID and programmatic.
Right.
Well, now UID is stitching that to some cookies, some impressions, some other signals that it decides is that right user on a non-logged in environment that I'm exposing that ad. Now I've got to suck all that data back, and now what am I measuring on? And am I actually getting that signal back all the way to the same identity infrastructure, or am I measuring it to something different? And now I have to ask the question: did I or did I not actually reach who I thought I would reach? And
Right.
You're not sure. So I actually think that's a really, I don't know that resonates easily for a lot of people who aren't in the weeds of this all.
Yeah.
But I think this idea of a commonality of the identity infrastructure through the whole process is actually one of the things I think is most misunderstood.
Right. Seems simple and obvious, but really important.
I think super important. I think it doesn't mean you have to do everything. It doesn't mean you have to come to TransUnion and source everything, but it does mean you should pick a TransUnion or others and create that connected tissue, and not just see yourself as pinpricking all the time.
Right.
So let me just get back to the question you asked, because I do think it's another good one, which is, well, how do agencies differentiate? For us, that is up to the agency, and we are the enabler. And what I can just tell you what we're seeing, and it is different for the agency. Each agency invests in different points. Some go hard into measurement differentiation. Some go hard into their analytical rigor around segmentation. Some go into much more full service creative into media pitch, et cetera, et cetera. So our viewpoint is, and I actually remember back in the day when I was at Omnicom, and I would do this with DoubleClick, where I was like, hey, DoubleClick, like, we're all sourcing the same thing from you. How do you differentiate? And what I took away from that time is how good DoubleClick was at saying to me, well, what do you want to enable? We'll enable that with you. We take the same approach. We've got lots of data assets. It's not just identity resolution. It's behavioral data. It's demographic data. It's shopping behavioral data. We've got measurement tools. What do you want to take from us on top of that? What are you building on your own?
That's where the differentiation happens.
That's right. And we'll feed our data assets into whatever your strategies are. And by the way, you don't have to come to our platforms. You want to access the data via the scaled cloud platforms, you can do that. You want to build it into some tool you're sourcing, you can do that. Our view is the best way to be really good at marketing in the future is to have a foundational data asset which is connected and scaled, and then you can build from there.
Okay, on that note, let's actually finally talk about AI. It's been interesting because we talked about this last couple of years of this signal loss, everyone trying to race to get more first party data, et cetera. And then you have the explosion of AI, and the excitement was initially, it's still around generative, but it's really taken hold on media buying and optimization quickly, which has opened up a some thinking that identity doesn't matter as much as maybe we thought because the platforms will know them in quotes in a different way than our identity data, and that will matter more over time. I guess that's probably maybe too big of a pendulum swing, but how do you think about that?
Yeah. I think that's an overcorrection. I think it speaks to this notion, which is, yes, the pendulum swung too far after the initial wave of the programmatic buying era, where the idea was I'm after one-to-one,
Yeah.
but do that, in an infinite number of times.
Right.
And the practical reality is that notion was silly from the get, right? We were never going to do scaled marketing on a one-to-one basis.
Right.
What we cared about, though, was moving from targeting adults 18 to 34, right? Like that was
with all sorts of waste or uncertainty, and yeah,
correct, right? On an index, and by that's a weak definition of a target, and then there's a lot of waste. So we absolutely, and probably guilty at charged at some point in time, probably in 10, 11, or 12, I probably was also spouting the potential to do one-to-one at scale, although I kind of have in my head, I always realized that was a bridge too far. But to that point, go, okay, well, that's a bunch of data and we were chasing that and that was silly. And so now, right, I can just look at other signals. I can look at other intent-based signals and say, why do I need identity at the core?
Right.
Yeah, listen, I think that's also too far. There will be instances, there will be executions where that's great. But I do want, in order to plan my business, not just plan my next marketing campaign or not just get some transaction next month, but in order to understand what products do I build, what market segments do I take, where's the blue ocean, I need to understand customers.
Yeah, I can't just be like, well, I don't know. Sometimes it works, and I get numbers from the platforms, and that's good. Yeah,
that's right. That's great at a certain size. But most of these large enterprise marketers, that doesn't tell you anything about what product to build next and what initiative to launch next. And should I be investing in sports? Should I be investing in entertainment? Should I be investing in, streaming television or streaming audio? Those decisions come from consumer insights. And consumer insights are not going to be available to you if you're just taking the outcome from an AI engine. Again, let's use these AI engines to massively speed how quickly we understand those things. Let's use AI engines to create a whole bunch of better propensity. Listen, those engines ultimately supercharge analytical power and thinking. We're using them as much as we possibly can and are inventing more all the time. But I think that the idea that those tools mean identity resolution and an understanding of consumers is less needed. I don't buy that argument.
Yeah. I like that. That was a firm opinion, man. I appreciate that.
No worries.
Okay, you mentioned you were early programmatic, you were an Analect, you were a Media Math at a time. I know it's so long ago in programmatic years, but what do you make of the market right now? Do you look at ad tech and it's like I don't even recognize the place anymore? Like especially with this fervor around agentic, do you have a sense of like where things stand right now, or do you just look at it like this is crazy?
All the above?
Yeah.
Listen, the buzz is back, which in some ways is great, in some ways is, annoying. Is that the right word?
Yeah.
There's an element where, again, a couple of years ago, I think we were all spending time almost apologizing for being in this category.
Right.
There wasn't a lot of funding coming this direction. It felt kind of like this, it was stale, and where was invention going to come from? And again, fast forward today, and the number of people starting new companies in this category are crazy. The number of ways that there is disruption because of clearly AI has unleashed a whole lot of ability to invent new stuff. I think it's as vibrant as it's been. So on one hand, as an entrepreneur, as an innovator, I love it.
Yeah.
On the other hand, as someone also that likes to figure out how to find patterns at scale, I think it's a noisy time.
Sure.
I think we're in the reality where over the next couple of years, we're going to have some hype cycles, and a lot of companies are going to get just enough business to stay relevant for a while. And a couple of years from now, they're going to have to fade and consolidate. We're going to go through that cycle again. So I guess it's all to say, listen, I think it's an exciting time to be in the category we're really in, which is marketing.
Yeah.
Right. And it's a really interesting time to understand how to do things differently in marketing, how to apply the same marketing strategies, but better and different at more scale. So to me, that's all fun. And along the way, though, it means we have to, catch up with a lot of new startups and figure out how to integrate some, and some will work and some won't. And that can be time consuming as well.
with a little bit of distance, there's a lot of talk about what an agency is going to fundamentally change if it isn't already. But there's a school of thought that there's going to be, you won't have media planners in the traditional sense, or the bots will drive completely. Do you imagine that being realistic, that clients and agencies would just be okay with letting that kind of take control without the kind of rigor that we're used to?
No, not fully. I don't buy it. I think that was that to me is there was another myth that we wrote in the early 2010s, if you will, that media buying was all going to move in house.
Right. Yeah.
And again, actually, on that one, I'm confident. I always felt was a little overdone.
Right.
Some have, most haven't. I think the same thing was probably getting a little overdone now, that we're going to wake up and it's just going to be all automated agents that are going to control everything.
Yeah.
But let's nuance this a little bit. We are going to have agents that do a shit ton of work in this ecosystem. I think that we will mostly keep a human in the loop somewhere. I think there will be checks and balances on that system, but the idea that we won't fundamentally be driven by agentic systems, right, would be silly to say that wouldn't happen. That will happen. And I'll actually just bring in this point. That's something I think is going to be interesting for this industry. Listen, I think in the next 12 to 24 months, whenever we have some type of economic pain, right, a quarter or two of less than ideal earnings, I am fearful that we will see a massive amount of layoffs in our category.
Right. There's your trigger to take, let's rush into this world.
I don't know how companies can avoid it in that scenario. Again, technology should automate. Technology creates more efficiency. It does mean we need less people in a lot of steps of the ecosystem. Right. And I think that's, how do we not have a reckoning in that way? Now, I'll add this. I entered, the digital marketing industry in the late 90s. And before that, none of the titles I've had, none of the jobs I've had existed before then. So there will be new work created. There will be new opportunities. But I am fearful in the short run that it will be hard on this industry, that we will lose a lot of people and job opportunities before we create new ones.
That'll be a hard reset. And then hopefully,
that's my take.
Sort of the nature. Last thing, you touched on this earlier. You and I were emailing back and forth. You mentioned it's a noisy time, maybe noisier than ever, and brands already had a tough time sorting through all the different. You guys have talked about how many MarTech partners, how many different data sources. What is it like right now for brands that people maybe don't grasp how crazy it is and challenging it is?
Yeah. Listen, I think marketers are, one day you're probably debating with your CIO and asking for different tags and platforms and infrastructure and integrate new technology partners. The next day you're turning to your CFO and you're debating whether the numbers are real. And hey, you're telling me there's all this growth from marketing, but we're not up that much. What's going on there? The next day you're being told by some big walled garden that if you just work with us exclusively or mostly, we'll be good and we'll deliver you data.
Right.
The next day you're looking at your measurement reports and you're trying to figure out attribution is who do I actually credit and how do I credit it? So listen, there's a lot going on. Again, I think if you have been in this industry for a while, if you've got the kind of underpinned data analytical chops, it doesn't mean you're a data modeler. It doesn't mean you're an analyst. I am neither of those things, but I've spent my career around data and asking questions. If you're figuring out how to prompt AI engines to understand and explore topics, I think there's a lot of fun in that. But there are a lot of things to have to solve for. And at the core, to drive sustainable growth, can be challenging, and it requires not always just pressing the easy button.
Yeah.
So I think it's possible, right? There are lots of companies that are out there to enable marketers to do this more effectively at scale. There's an ecosystem of partners. I think the industry is doing an ever better job of playing together. But absolutely, it's a trying time to be a marketer. And I saw the headline the other day that there's a little bit of downward pressure again on CMO tenure. Not shocking.
Yeah.
So listen, again, I guess my headline is it's an interesting time, but it's not.
Yeah, you're not bored.
Time.
Yeah,
you're not bored.
It's a little chaotic, but it's better than nothing interesting going in your life.
That's right.
All right, Matt, awesome stuff. We could talk about this forever, but thanks so much for your time and a great conversation. Let's do it again down the road.
Sounds good, Mike. Good to see you.
Thanks again to my guest this week, TransUnion's Matt Spiegel, and my partners at Intent IQ. If you like this week's episode, please take a moment to rate and leave a review. We have lots more to bring you, so please hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you next time for more What's Next in Media. Thanks for listening.